Welcome to Tales from the Heart, a podcast brought to you by the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association. And this is a special edition. This is a Share Your Story. I am super excited to have one of my favorite New Zealanders join me today, who I've known for many, many years. And we're going to tell a little bit of our story and her story, which is almost mind-blowing to me. Heidi, welcome to Tales from the Heart, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So let's do a little history dive first. I can remember getting on I think it was a Skype call with you and Chris, your husband. What year would that have been?
I feel like that was about maybe 8 years ago.
So right before my transplant, I think.
Yes, it was definitely before your transplant. So I would say, and it was long before mine, so it would be about 8 years ago.
You live in New Zealand, which explains that super cool accent you have to some of our listeners. Can you tell me a little bit about your HCM journey up until the time that we connected 8 years ago?
I had, as you know, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I was diagnosed when I was 6 weeks old. There is a long family history. So my father had it, his mother had it, his sister had it, and then she had a son. He had it and it still has it. That's sort of where it's stopped. It hasn't gone, and he chose not to have children. I have got children, but that's sort of where it stopped for now. And then at 6 weeks old, I was sort of just monitored. It wasn't really recognized as a very serious condition at that point. My mother had just noticed that I'd had sort of blue lips and just wasn't feeding properly. And I don't think they really understood that it was a hereditary condition, because we're a small country, so there were still very few people that had been diagnosed with it. Then sort of fast forward to 10 years old, I'd been having trouble having a lot of syncope, which is sort of, just passing out, and just generally really tired. I've been put on beta blockers. They were awful for me. They made me gain an enormous amount of weight when I was 10 and slowed me right down that I almost just was existing. And then I remember doing a running race at school and just sort of passing out. And then that was sort of the beginning of the end, I think. Well, not the beginning of the end, but sort of the beginning of a long journey. And so at 10, I had myectomy. I had to fly from Christchurch, which is in the bottom of the South Island, to a place called Auckland, which is in top of the North Island, because that is the only place that they did the surgery. And that was pretty scary for my mum. I was the youngest of 4 children. She just had to go by herself and take me. And so I was there for, I think, 6 to 8 weeks recovering. I had a collapsed lung, so I couldn't fly. So yeah, it was a pretty long journey and pretty hard for my mother. For me, I think I remember trips to the zoo in a wheelchair. I remember getting lots of soft toys. So for me, it didn't seem too bad as the patient. I remember getting cards from the kids at school and thinking this is great, and the food in the hospital wasn't bad. And then I sort of carried on for probably, I want to say maybe 5. I was sort of monitored, but I carried on for sort of maybe 5 years, and then the symptoms started coming back again. In those days, they didn't realize that the abnormal muscle could keep growing back, because I'd been so young when I'd had that first surgery. I became obstructed again. So I had a brilliant doctor at the time, who's since no longer with us, but she was wonderful, and she just sort of let me keep going until enough got to enough. And I think I was about 17, and she said, Heidi, I think enough's enough. You need another surgery, because I think we were trying to delay it as long as possible. And I said, well, unless you can give me a date and a time, I'm just going to carry on. So I moved to Australia. Then I got really sick when I was there and had to get back to New Zealand and have an emergency surgery made to me when I was 18. And then things were okay for a bit again. And then I hit 25 and I was biking to work, and I had a cardiac arrest and was sort of left, they think, for about half an hour unresponsive before someone came and helped me. And then I was put on ice in a coma for 2 days, and my parents got that lovely knock at the door from the police and said, we don't think she's going to make it. We found your daughter. So I was really lucky. I came around from that. I got a defibrillator put in. And then I think was probably the first time in my life where I was like, okay, this is a really serious condition. I think we now get that it's serious. Whereas before, my parents had never treated me any different. So I just had sort of carried on, and it hadn't really affected my life apart from these surgeries every couple of years, which to me didn't feel too much of a mountain. So when I was 25, I had that cardiac arrest and then the defibrillator, and then that went off numerous times. I had problems with the electrics in my heart by that stage. So I would quite often get up to 220 beats and pass out and need to get shocked. So that was quite a regular occurrence, and that would happen if I was stressed or if I'd been sick with the flu or too much pressure, too much work. It could be actually any number of things. Sometimes it didn't feel like there'd been anything going on, and that would happen. So I went through a few defibrillators.
I want to bring your husband into the equation.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Let's not forget about him, because he's kind of played an important role in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, of course.
You were 25 at your arrest. When did you get married?
Okay, so I had my cardiac arrest, and then 6 weeks out from that cardiac arrest, went to dinner with some friends, and they said, oh, we've got a blind date coming for you. And I literally, my hair had fallen out from the cardiac arrest. I really was a hot mess. And I was on medication, so I had a really swollen face. I just looked horrendous. Well, for me, I felt like I didn't look great. And then this blind date turned up, and I'm like, oh, he's quite nice looking. This is awkward. So I had a few wines, which I probably shouldn't have had. Then I was like, oh, he's really handsome. And now I just don't want us to talk. I just going to stay silent because I'm worried that I've had a couple of wines and I don't really want to talk now. So I was just pretty much silent, which is not really me.
That's not you.
No, so I was pretty much silent. And then he drove me home, and then he said to our friend, oh, I don't think that date went very well. And then we had a second date, and I just sort of said, look, I didn't even know this is how I felt, but this just came out after having had a cardiac arrest. I said, unless you're interested in getting married and having a baby, I don't really need a man, and that's just where I'm at. And he was like, okay, that's pretty forward for a second date. And he goes, okay, then that's fine. And then I think that was the October, and then he moved in the February, and then the rest is really history. So we've been together quite a long time now, 18 years, I think. He moved in, we then got engaged a year later, and then a year after that we got married. We had a lovely service, it was beautiful. And then a year later after that, we found out that we were expecting. We had known that obviously this condition was hereditary, so we had intended to do IVF to get the gene not taken out, but to get all the embryos and eggs and things tested. But unfortunately, while we were just starting that program, well, not actually fortunately, not unfortunately, one got past the goalie. So that is our daughter, Coco. She will be 16 in October, and she does not have the heart condition. So we were very blessed with that. Very, very blessed. So we had testing done very early on. And I guess at that stage it was still a newish condition here in New Zealand. There wasn't that many people with it. And I think they still didn't realise how serious that condition was in pregnancy. I had a cardiac arrest when I was 20 weeks pregnant with her. I was lucky that I had the defibrillator. There had been a lot. Other than that, I had a very smooth pregnancy. But I think, let's not forget, at 20 weeks pregnant, having a cardiac arrest is not really ideal.
The good news is she's a perfectly healthy child.
And I had a C-section, and it was pretty unremarkable as far as, that was just pretty standard. There was no issues. Other than that major event at 20 weeks, there were no other issues as far as the pregnancy. I worked right up until the sad day, had her on the Tuesday. There was no I was really blessed with a beautiful pregnancy. Yeah, very lucky, very lucky. Okay. So after that, I had her. I think I got an infection, we believe, probably through breastfeeding. And so the defibrillator, I think, was here. And then what had happened was I got a staphylococcal infection inside there. So it sort of moved so far through my breast tissue, it almost exited out of my breast. That's what led to transplant. So they worked out that I'd had a staphylococcal infection. So then they had to remove all the leads. I had defibrillator put on the opposite side, which is not ideal because just with the leads going to the heart, it's not really ideal. So that had to happen. And then because of that, they had to take the leads out. It caused a leak. I think there must have been a tear. I'm not sure. But so then I had to have, when I was 38, I had to have valve surgery. So Coco was about 9 or 10 then.
3 open hearts at that point.
Yeah, so 3 open hearts at that point. And then I never really recovered from that. So I think I recovered from the surgery, and I kind of went along okay. And then I just got really sick. So I went on a work trip to Vanuatu, this amazing trip that I've been selected to go on for work. And I was sick the whole time. So I was sick on the plane ride over there, sick on the bus ride. Things are not really great. By this stage, I couldn't carry my handbag. My daughter was carrying my handbag. I hadn't noticed that those things were happening, but they were happening. I guess my family and everyone around me could see that I was getting sicker, but I just didn't want to give in to it, I think. And I had a really good job, so I was so focused on that. And then after that trip, I just sort of, I had to have several cardio versions to, I think maybe 10 over a course of many months to get my rhythm correct again. And it just wouldn't. And I just kept going into atrial fibrillation. And for me, some people can go many years with that and it's fine. But with all the other complications, I now had a heart that had had 3 open heart surgeries. I still had another leaking valve. It just was a pretty sick heart. It was pretty overworked. It was massive and I just didn't feel great. So by that stage, I think I took some holidays. And then when I stopped at that point, I just couldn't get back up, basically. It was like everything had kept going. Then I stopped. And I'm like, okay, I actually can't get back up again. I can't. There was just nothing I could do. There was just no steam left. So at that point, my cardiologist was like, I think we really need to look at transplant. And I was like, no, I'm not sick enough for that. He's like, no, you really are. And I was like, okay. So then I flew to Auckland.
Somewhere between that third surgery and you going back to Auckland is, I think, when we first talked.
At the start of 2018, I went to Auckland. So I feel like we had a conversation 2 years prior to that. Yeah. And so at that point when I was talking to you, I was like, I don't know what I need to be asking for. These are my stats. This is my echo. I don't really know what I need to be asking. Am I actually sick enough? And you're like, I think you really need to be, and I'm like, really? When I spoke to you, I was still working and I was still doing really well at work. And I thought, no, I've got this. It's fine. I think, no, we're being a bit too, And then I almost really left it too long. I think they'd mentioned it to me and I was like, no, I don't need a heart transplant. No, that's not for me. I don't want to have that. No. And then I think it's only when you sort of pushed into such a corner and the quality of life is it's just not great, that you're like, okay, well, I want to do everything I can to survive because it's a natural human instinct. You want to survive, so you want to be around and you want to be around for yourself, but mainly for your family, you want to be around. And I was like, I'm too young, so okay, let's get on with this. So I went to Auckland and I still was saying to them when I got there, I don't really think I'm sick enough. Like, because I still looked really okay, apart from I didn't have a great colour, but I still looked okay. So if anybody else looked at me, they'd be like, she looks fine. So I didn't have blue lips or anything, but I was really quite puffy because I was retaining so much water, swollen ankles. I really wasn't in great shape. I had to sleep with maybe, I feel like 6 pillows under me because I just couldn't lie flat. And I remember saying to my husband after that trip to Auckland, actually, I just would think I might just close my eyes and maybe if someone could give me a pill, I could just, because I just felt I didn't want to die, but I just felt so terrible. I couldn't imagine life at that point getting any better. It was just every day was a struggle. I had to pick whether I would pick my daughter up from school or make a meal, but it couldn't be both things. It was one or the other. It was just too much doing both things. And that sounds crazy because they're not even two really big things, but I guess they're things that we take for granted when we're well.
That's a really good point to the listeners who are heading to transplant. So 5% of HCM patients will go to transplant. Mm-hmm. It's an uncommon endpoint, but for those of us who our hearts are not cooperating, it's our get out of jail free card. So we need to make sure that we aren't being lulled into a false sense of security by we look okay. Or we can do some things. We just have to make our world smaller. So I can remember I went through my transplant and you were part of my support group and cheering club during my transplant on February 2nd, 2017. What is your transplant date?
So mine was July 2018.
And then you did a whole year of blogging on your recovery. And then you disappeared for a while. You're just like, okay, you saw me for a year. And Heidi kind of went into seclusion from social media. At least that's what it felt like for me.
I wouldn't say seclusion. I think I felt like I'd shared quite a lot of my life, and I'm actually, even though I'm very outgoing and I love people, I'm actually quite private. My family had, I guess, a lot of me taken away from them. I wasn't recovering. I didn't see my daughter for 28 days. You know, it was a lot. And the blogging was really therapeutic, I think, for me. It also, I wanted to be able to go back and look and go, oh, that's how I felt. I don't remember. Because when you have such a massive thing happen, you're on a lot of drugs, as you know, ones that make you feel superhuman, all those prednisone, lovely steroids. And you just, like, I think it's hard to remember when it's been a traumatic time. I find it hard to remember because I think I block things out. And I think that's been the way that I've been able to cope for so long with so many surgeries, that you learn to block things out. So I think it is good to document things. I enjoyed doing it. It was really great. I had so much support from so many people backing me, which was lovely. And then I thought, okay, now I just need a year to get myself sorted. I was going back to work. I wanted to sort of see how that looked. And then I was in discussions with the team about, I always wanted another child. I never wanted to have an only child, although I was so grateful just to have one child, of course. I'd always thought, oh, once she's at school, I'll have another baby. And then that never happened because I got so sick. I started talking to the transplant doctors and I said, okay, so I've had a transplant now. So what does this look like? Can this be a possibility? Because I think for me, I didn't want to ever live in regret. I thought I'd been given the second chance, and I know everything comes with risks, but you monitor the risks. In New Zealand, we're a very small country, so there were not very many women of childbearing age that had been through transplant that then were able to have a child. So I just asked the question. I said, well, and one of the cardiologists said, no, absolutely not. And I said, okay, well, I'm not really happy with that answer. And she said, well, these are the reasons why. I think you should really seriously think about that. So I sort of left it, and then it was still niggling at me. And I was like, no, I think I need to look at this. I could see in America, I joined up a Facebook group called Pregnancy and Transplant, I think it's called. And then the woman that obviously runs that group, it's a massive group that's run out of America, sent me all this information. And I thought, oh, if it's possible for people in America, I'm sure it's possible here. So I asked again, and I'd been further out of my transplant by that stage. They're like, okay, sure. What you need to understand is transplant patients have a shortened lifespan. So that's something that you just need to consider. If you have a child now, you might last for 30 years, you might not. You ultimately probably have a shortened lifespan. So you need to think about that if you're bringing a child into the world. And I said, okay, that's fine. So Chris and I talked about it, and we're like, yeah, okay, we want to do this. So then we adjusted all of my medication. I think I was on mycophenolate and tacrolimus. Those together are not a combination for pregnancy. So that got changed to tacrolimus and back on prednisone. Not a high dose of prednisone, just 5 milligrams. I don't know what the protocol was in America, but I was on pravastatin as well, which is...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to be on a statin.
Yeah, so I got taken off those and just was on prednisone and tacrolimus. We just thought that we would get pregnant naturally because I guess Coco was one past the goalie. So we just assumed that we didn't try actively to get her. That would just be, we'll just try and we'll get pregnant immediately. It never had occurred to us that would be difficult. We tried for a year and nothing happened. And I thought, okay, that's strange. I went back to this beautiful woman that I dealt with 15 years ago at the hospital, and I thought, oh, I hope she's still there. This 15 years is a long time. Maybe she's not there. And I emailed her and I said, do you think we could look at getting government funding to try and do IVF again? Because it was the IVF where they can take, fiddle with the genes.
PGD.
PGD. So make sure that we're not implanting. So in New Zealand, you can get funded, but you have to not be over 40. So it was 2 weeks before my 40th birthday. So she goes, Heidi, you're cutting it a little bit fine. And I said, well, I'd really like you to see if we can. So I rang every day. And then I got through and I got an appointment. So we were really lucky. We got one round of government-funded treatment because it's I don't know if it's the same in America, but it's very expensive here to do IVF treatment. So that wasn't successful. So I think we got a good number of eggs, but I think we did maybe 3 embryo transfers on that one, and it didn't take. And then we did another round. And then I got less eggs that time. And I think we did two of the embryos were, I think we got maybe 5 embryos. Two had the gene and 2 didn't. So we implanted those 2. So now we're up to 5 embryos that were able to be implanted. And then third round, we had a 6th embryo implanted, and that was a successful one. So it was a really long journey. 4 years in total of trying, but about 3.5 years of IVF.
And it worked. I was very surprised to see this little ultrasound picture come up on the internet. And I'm like, what is happening? So it's not very common for a heart transplant patient to become pregnant. It does happen. There are a few that I know of, but it's not common. They kind of...
No, it's not common at all.
Part of the reason why, like, as soon as like the baby was born, I'm like, okay, you and I need to talk about this. You need to podcast with me because we have to share this story because you've been through so much. There was a piece of your life that was missing. We haven't revealed the gender of the child yet, so I'll hold on to that one for a second. You wanted your family to grow a little, and you were able to use IVF, PGD, your transplant team, your husband, your support team, and you made it work. Number one, I am not surprised that if somebody could make this all happen, it was going to be you, because that's just your personality. And if you put your mind to something, it happens. I am living in America today, and it is February 24 while we're recording this. And some recent things have happened in the United States related to IVF that are very troubling. The state of Alabama has decided that embryos have personhood and they can't be destroyed. And it is a slippery slope to figure out what's going to happen to those embryos that can't be destroyed. I am really happy that you were able to use the technology and that you were able to build your family the way that worked for you. For anybody who might be listening to this later wondering, is there value to IVF? Number one, you were able to have a child. Number two, you were able to have a child free of HCM. Number three, you were able to do this because this is the way that your family could be built. Any quick thoughts about what it would mean if IVF wasn't available?
I think you grow up and kind of it's the dream. You kind of sold this dream, actually. All children probably to a point are sold this dream. You grow up, you meet someone, you fall in love. You don't have to get married, but you meet someone, you meet your person, and then you think, oh, I'm going to have a child, and it's going to be that easy. And it actually isn't that easy. And it's not that easy for a lot of people. And I think until you've walked that journey, it's just, have another baby and, that's fine. And you don't really realize the comments. I would never say that to somebody. And I wouldn't have said it before IVF, but I most certainly would never say to a newly married couple or to a new couple together, oh, when are you having a baby? You don't know what people's stories are. You don't know how long they've been trying. And I never thought that IVF was going to be part of my journey. I just assumed I would get pregnant. But in saying that, my body had been through a huge amount. I'm 43, and that also is old and childbearing age.
You're a geriatric mother.
Yes, exactly. So I was extremely lucky to have a really good team. IVF is not for everybody. It's pretty grueling. It is definitely not for everybody. So I was really lucky. I had an amazing transplant team. I had an amazing maternal team here. My family were amazing because I think I probably at times was not the best on all the hormone medications. They make you go a little bit wonky, to say the least.
Oh, hormones are so much fun.
Yes, they are fun. So, it definitely isn't for everybody, but I'm really pleased that it was available to me. It was a large cost, but I'm very pleased that it was available to us. It was an option. Even if things had not worked out, I would have been satisfied that at least I've been given this life. So at least I had tried. So if it hadn't worked out, I would have gone, okay, I can close the door now. I'm not looking back. I can know that I've tried everything, and I would have been okay because I had accepted once before that I was only going to have one child. So I'd accepted that. But when there was a possibility and there was a wee crack in the door where I thought, I can get in there.
So when was the baby born?
He was born on the 5th of October. We like October in this house. So 5th of October. We have September into October babies, and I'm the only June one. But so everybody's kind of the same in my house. So the 5th of October last year, 2023.
And the gender of the baby?
He is a boy.
It's a boy.
He is called Remy, and we named him after Remiel, which is Angel of Hope. So He is just Remy, not Remy out, but it was just very fitting. The night before I was going in for my C-section, my daughter said, I don't like the name that you've chosen. And I said, okay, tell me about that. She said, I'm a teenager, I'm 15, and I know kids and I don't like that name. So I said, okay, well, can you come up with some suggestions? So she had a few things from Twilight, Xander, Xavier, a few sort of names that sounded like Twilight. And then I think I said, what about Remy? And she said, yeah, that's not bad. Yep, that's I like that. And so I looked up the meaning, and then when I saw Remy out, Angel of Hope, I was like, that's meant to, that name is absolutely meant to be.
Remy is now
he'll be five months next week. Yeah.
I do enjoy seeing the photos on social where he's growing. The picture that you put up the other day, was that a lamb chop?
So we have Coco when she was born. She was born on the 15th of October. So at Christmas time, we did a photo of her with a big leg of ham. And then this year we didn't have a big ham for Christmas. We had a lamb. So big ham, little lamb. So it worked out perfectly. So we had a big lamb and then him beside it. So
that was cute.
We just sort of carried on the family tradition.
That's really cute. You have had 4 open heart surgeries, multiple defibrillators.
Oh yeah, I've lost count actually. I feel like it's maybe 7 or 9. I can't remember, but a lot.
Cardioversions, atrial fibrillation, transplant, IVF. You are the picture of success of clinical trials and scientific innovation. And it's allowed you to live a life with your family the way you wanted to live your life. What would you say to other people who are either in the middle of their HCM journey or just starting it? Now, granted, let's take this into consideration. It's 2024. You're 43 years old. You were diagnosed at birth. So that brings us back to like around 1980-ish. The world was very different then. And
absolutely.
Even 15 years ago, it was very different. And we're here today. You've been through a lot. What would you say to other people who are starting this journey or worried that maybe they're going to have to do some of the things that you did?
I think get yourself a good medical team. That is the first thing, because throughout the journey, I have had people accuse me of faking symptoms. This is medical professionals. So this is going back into the 80s, but accusing, she's being a bit dramatic. I was a child. Saying that to a child is so damaging. So I think get yourself a really good team. If you are not happy with your team, get a second opinion. If you have the luxury of being able to get a second opinion. I don't know what it's like in the States. We don't have... In the 80s, we didn't really have the luxury of getting a second opinion because there weren't that many cardiologists. But I think now, in 2024, the world looks a lot different for HCM patients. It's even in the time that is from, I'm 43, so a lot has changed. I already know there would have been different treatment in my plan. However, I would have still ended up here with a transplant. And life is okay with HCM as well. I had those surgeries, and it sounds a lot. And I guess when you say it like that, and when Lisa says it like that, it is a lot. However, in between those times, I did have some really good stretches. In the time between I was 10 and sort of 16, I did synchronized swimming, which is a really hard sport to do. And I managed to do it really well, go to national competitions, those sorts of things. And I wasn't held back by my HCM. Yes, I had medication and I was constantly monitored, but I did have some really good breaks in between all of the other things that did happen. So HCM, you can live okay. Like you can actually live a great life with it as long as you've got the right team, the right medication, and you've got someone that actually knows about it. In between those little hiccups that I've had a great life. There's no regrets, apart from the worst part of all of this was the lead up to transplant. I was really sick. I couldn't really get out of bed. So that honestly has been the worst part of the condition. Up until then, I've worked full time. It hasn't held me back at school or any part of my life, really. It didn't hold me back from doing all the things that I wanted to do.
But it probably would have been even better if you didn't have to do it with a wonky heart.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it was... but I guess if you're watching this, you probably you might be interested in HCM, or you might have a family member. I think the key is you don't treat people differently. You let them live their life, but you might have to live your life with some precautions or some limitations. And I think it's good to know your limitations. I think sometimes I probably push myself a little bit too much, but I think it is good to know your limitations. But I absolutely think it's good to get, your medication correct. There was a lot of medication that I was given that wouldn't be given now. There's been a massive improvement as far as that goes. So it's almost, if you are born with this condition, it is better to be born in 2024 than 1980.
80 was the year I was diagnosed at 12. So
yeah.
And I'm envious of the timing, because in my mind growing up, I was going to have 3 children. Well, maybe I kind of ended up with one biologic and being there for my sister's children after her passing. So I kind of had 3 kids, but I kind of wanted another one biologically. And by the time I was transplanted, it was way too late for anything like that. But having that option today is absolutely astounding. And we do have a number of younger women going to transplant, in their mid 30s to 40s. And to know that there is the possibility for some, it's not right for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
For some, if you are doing well and you've got a stable heart and there's no rejection and your medical management can be altered, yet keep you safe, pregnancy past transplant is really possible. And I think that's so encouraging.
And I think that for me, they told me to do all these things post-transplant, and I have been religious in doing them. So I take my medication at the right time. I don't sort of waver. For me, I don't drink alcohol at all. That's different for everybody. But I knew that what I wanted to do and what I wanted out of my life. And I was like, okay, I don't drink coffee. There's things that I don't know whether they make a difference. Do you know what I mean? I actually don't know whether they make a difference. But for me, there were some things that I could do where I thought, okay, if I can just do that, then, you choose your journey once you've had transplant. And some things that are right for you might not be right for other people, and vice versa. And I've learned that because I've met so many people on my journey that do different things to me, and they're happy and they're good too. So, it's just different for everyone, really. But the medication is the key, really.
I could live without alcohol. I don't drink a lot, but I do have an old fashioned from time to time. But I don't think I could go without caffeine.
Well, actually, it's funny. I have been drinking coffee because with a baby waking in the night, but I've now just gone back to decaf. So I hadn't had coffee for 5 years, and then I've started having coffee, but it has now too much of an effect on me. So I actually am going back to decaf. So I've gone back to decaf. I love the taste of coffee. So decaf it is for me. I think it's too many years. I think I drank so much coffee when I was so unwell to probably stay awake,
Through this whole journey, I want to kind of lean back into Chris for a second. And I'm doing this for a very particular reason. There are a lot of young people who are listening to the podcast now. They may be in their 20s, teens, 20s, maybe even early 30s, and they're wondering how they're going to manage a relationship. What does that look like? I think it's really interesting that you and Chris got together right after you tried to die with a cardiac arrest, but they saved you and they brought you back, and he shows up into your life. If that's not serendipity, I don't know what is. But what would you tell people about the dating scene and meeting somebody after such an event?
I think I was just authentically myself. I think that I said, hey, this happened to me. This is a condition that I've got. I don't know how that looks. I don't know how this is going to play out. Basically, I think I just said, I don't know how this is going to play out. Is this going to be an issue for you? And he was like, no, it's not a problem. Because I guess the thing that we've got to remember is we're people before we are, the condition isn't us. We are people with a heart condition. The heart condition is not us. So I think that that's really key. Like, I think it was appropriate at that time because I had a cardiac arrest just to say, hey, this is me and this is what's happened. But I don't know necessarily that I would have done in the relationships that I'd had previously and had dated. I hadn't said I've got this heart condition because I guess they weren't serious. Like the people that I was dating was not serious. So it's a personal choice. I think if you know it's going to be serious, then you would probably mention it.
I think that's good dating advice.
Yeah, I think like you don't need to tell, but also it's up to you. If you don't want to, if you can't see a future with that person and it's just someone that you want to hang out with, then you don't need to tell them. And if you're relatively well, then
I think choosing the right people and And then I do believe in energy, and I do believe in vibes. And obviously you and Chris kind of clicked right off the bat. There was something there, and you took the chance, and obviously it's worked out quite well. He's been with you for the whole journey.
Yes,
and he is very lucky. I'm hoping he watches this.
He's got all this drama. He's so lucky.
Yeah.
He's got a wild ride is what he got, actually. Life with us, Lisa, you and I, is never boring.
Never boring.
We are not beige. We are not beige.
No, we might even have a little purple.
We're rainbows.
We definitely are. And we understand life in a different way. Yeah. If you're listening to this episode, there's so much in here. There's so much in this one episode about living life.
That almost now it would be a superpower, all the things that I've been through. So I almost think that it makes me better at relationships, better at life. I've got a lot more empathy because of the things that I have been through. So I actually think it's almost like a superpower to have been through all these things and have come out the other side.
You've survived all these things. I've survived all these things. Many in the community have survived. There's a number of different ways of dealing with it. I don't think anybody has the rule book on the right way or the wrong way.
Absolutely.
But I do believe that some are born with, maybe develop a sense of resiliency, that I got knocked down, I got back up. I got knocked down, I got back up. And for us, it's just part of life to get knocked down and to get back up. But when somebody's new to this and they get knocked down, they don't always know how to get up. We were children dealing with the diagnosis, and it was always part of us. And if you get to middle life, midlife, 30s, 40s, 50s, and you get hit and you get knocked down, you may not possess the skills to know how to get back up physically or emotionally. And I think we build some inborn resilience after going through these things a few times, that I'm not saying it's a great lesson. It's just the way we were. And it's the life that we had. And don't feel bad if you get knocked down a little bit and you're not sure how to get back up. Ask for help. That's what the HCM is here for. We help you get back up.
Well, that was part of, because I think at that point when I reached out to you, I was like, I actually don't know. I don't know what to do, because I had a father that had this condition too, but his was presented so differently to mine, and it was not nearly as severe as mine. Ultimately, he did pass away from the condition, but he got to 76. So, I mean, that was still too soon for me, but he still had a relatively uncomplicated medical history until he got to about 65. So it presents and that's the thing to remember, is that yes, I've had a transplant, you've had a transplant, but that's not almost the norm. We're a very small percentage of people that have transplant, but there's so many variations of this disease that all of it's important and all of it's relative to the person, and it just presents itself differently. And I think that we've got to remember that as a community, that it's still an awful condition. I still wouldn't wish anybody to have this condition ever, but that's why your team and you, Lisa, are so, I mean, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know if I would have ended up at transplant had I not connected with you. I might have still been going, I'm not sick enough. I don't think I'm ready yet. And I wouldn't be here.
You were cute in your level of denial. You're like, no, I've done this, I've done that, I'll be fine. And I'm like looking at the documents and I'm like, girlfriend, we need to have a talk.
I think that that's important for people to be able to have you to reach out. Like, we don't have anything like that we don't have HCMA in New Zealand. We don't have.
Well, I'm hoping that our good friend Lee Bell in Australia might be able to work with those in New Zealand. It's a little bit closer in proximity. The timelines work better. And hopefully the Australian group can provide some support as they develop. So maybe you want to become a volunteer for them too. Hint, hint.
Of course. I will absolutely do that. That's no problem.
Okay, Lee, I'm going to tie you and Heidi together, and you'll take care of the Down Under crew. And hopefully someday I'll come down and meet you guys in person.
Oh, I'm waiting. I got so excited when I saw on your screen that you were coming to Christchurch. I thought, is she coming? Is she coming and not told me? She told Chris and not told me. And I'm going to be really excited if you're coming. I got so excited.
I got to Brazil. I probably should have jumped over at that point when I was in Brazil. It would have been a less exhausting flight, but someday I'm going to do it.
Well, we're waiting. We're waiting.
I look forward to that day.
We have a tour guide and a place to stay.
I think it has to happen. I'm working on this thing called HCMA International, and we are trying to develop advocates in different countries obviously New Zealand and Australia, we all speak English and it's easy to communicate, but the healthcare systems are different. The resources and support are a little bit different because of timing. We're running discussion groups while you're sleeping. We have to get the clocks coordinated and figure out ways to provide more support to more families worldwide. And we're starting to make some real progress there. We will eventually get there. I am going to wrap up this episode, but I think that this is one that I think we need to check back in a couple of months and see how the baby's growing and see how you're
we can
doing
get him on here. He's
Ooh.
swimming at the moment, but we can get him on. We can bring him on for an introduction. He'd love it. He's very cheeky.
So I think that would be lovely. And I think a lot of our transplant community friends would love to see that. And I invite you to join us on a transplant pathway discussion group. We hold them at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So I don't really know what time that is, or if you're awake or asleep or whatever. I'm going to end this edition and say thank you so much for joining us. This has been really interesting, inspiring. Heidi, I'm really excited, really inspired, honestly, very honored to have been a small part of your journey. I'm getting teary, which is why my throat is going. There are patients with HCM all over the world. And in my work, I am honored to be a part of a story. It's an interesting world for me because we become very close for a period of time. Then things calm down and you go back to your life. And, you know, this part of your life is kind of moved on a little bit. You're set in your transplant and you're doing well. And I get to sit back through social media and watch the aftermath. Your recovery was inspiring. That picture of a baby, like an ultrasound, I was like, what? Because I hadn't known anybody who'd done it before. I know people who have, like, third degree, but I didn't know anybody personally who had gone through the whole journey. And it was really inspiring. It was, I had tears at multiple times. I'm like, I just want to go visit her, but she's so far away.
No, it is so far away.
It doesn't really get any further away unless you want to go to Antarctica. It's been an inspirational journey to watch. I can't wait to see what happens next because you're going to be up to something else. I'm sure of it.
I'm sure the journey doesn't stop now.
Oh no, you got a new baby. You got a 20-year journey ahead of you that's going to be interesting.
At least. I
think the teenage years to 20, that's like one part of the journey. And then it's a whole different journey when they're grown up and, you know, getting out on their own. But you know that because you've got a 16-year-old too. And I don't know how you're doing it. 16 and newborn.
You know, it's the taxi service at this stage with the 15-year-old. It's the taxi service, and then you've got the other extreme where you're feeding. Oh, that's the other thing is that I am breastfeeding as well. So that's something that, yeah. So I would. That is possible post transplant. That's possible.
Tacrolimus does not express through breast.
So I just thought I would mention that as well because that's probably quite important because I didn't know if that was something that I was going to be able to do, and I'm delighted that I can.
That is amazing. Technology is amazing.
But I am on because obviously my body is producing tacrolimus. I'm on very high doses because otherwise it's not at a therapeutic level because I think because I'm producing milk, 10 milligrams in the morning and 10 milligrams at night, which is so high. But that's because, so it's obviously metabolizing quicker is what I'm trying to say.
I'm going to say thanks and I'm going to end. Heidi, thank you so much for sharing your story.